and let's get it started.
Erstmal herzlich willkommen zu unserem Talk. 10.000
First of all, thank you and welcome to the talk.
10.000 Seiten später, welche
10,000 pages later, what kind of feelings I have after reading these reports. And I'm very privileged to be able to ask questions to you, and because many things are actually quite complex, and here we can go very deep into the topic. Hi, my name is Claudia. And during my everyday life, I look into climate science, and I'm also involved in the topics of meteorology, climate science, and I'm working as a journalist who's, so as a journalist, I'm very eager to ask questions, and I'm very happy to do that. And you have read the IPCC report on a voluntary basis. So the IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Some people call it the Climate Council, the Global Climate Council. But it's actually a very big institution that has been working since the 80s. And the task of that consortium is to look at climate change closely and use the scientific evidence as a foundation for political decision-making. That means that there is more than 200 governments, more than 100 organizations that are involved in the IPCC, and it's a really, really big organization. And they have released 6 reports and 10 special reports, and you have produced a podcast together with Julian Freistetter, and you have looked very closely at the contents of these reports. And first of all, why did you read all of that? Well, that's actually a good question. I have to admit that this was never my intention. And Julian was looking for someone who would read those reports and to do this together with him. And I actually didn't know that it would be 10,000 pages. I only knew it was a lot. But I also found this topic so interesting. And that's why I said, yes, I actually want to do this. So I want to read this for 1.5 years. I want to read the whole thing. Okay, and about the contents, this is something you talked a lot about in the podcast. And I just, so I have also listened to that podcast because I'm also very interested in climate science. So the title of the podcast is der Podcast zur Wissenschaft hinter der Krise. And I think it is something important to talk about, and I'm yes, I'm very excited to hear about all the things that we're going to talk about. And I still wonder, when you look at this huge topic, is there also something that makes you happy when you look at those really big things? When it comes to positive emotions, yes, there are some. When you read these reports, then there are also positive aspects or positive things, because you have the feeling that, yes, I'm looking at this, I'm understanding it, and I'm talking about this, I'm reading about it, and I feel more safe in this topic, because there's so much information coming from all sides. And I'm also proud because I almost read all of because I almost read all of it. So you need a lot of endurance. So just a short remark. So it's actually not like a series. It's more like, yeah. Okay, so actually, so you can't just jump right into the middle of something in this topic. You have to actually begin at the very start and then proceed to the end in the right order. But I'm really happy that I managed to process everything in one go. And do you have the feeling that you understand the things better now, or is it still overwhelmingly complex? You need to, differentiate. So there's 3 parts. One part of the report is the physical foundations, which also includes the meteorology, which is my background. But there are also parts that I didn't anticipate. You look at money, capitalism, inequality in the world, and innovation process. How can we develop new technology? There is a lot of things that I didn't expect. When you think about emotions, of course, there's this feeling that accomplishment that you have managed to process everything. But the thing is that the things that you've read, these are things that are already known. These reports just combine all that existing knowledge to write this one long report. And we as humanity actually know all of these things. Now we just need to act on the knowledge. And when I think about this, so there's a lot of negative emotions when in this topic. So how are there things that make you sad when you read these reports? Because the knowledge is there. Yes, some things have made me sad, and it's true. When you read these reports, then you're on an emotional roller coaster. And I was saddened by, as a society, that we are wasting a lot of time. And to read this again and again, because it's not just stated once, but many times, when you see the curves, the CO2 levels over time, there are so many missed opportunities, and it's happening again and again. Every time I'm saddened by this, and you feel this vulnerability. We humans are vulnerable because we are dependent on this planet. And I feel guilt because I am part of society. And this is a difficult emotional state, and it's hard to bear sometimes. Because for some people, yes, for those who are affected by it, who are the cause for this development, we still feel powerless. So sometimes I think talking about this
in general, like with the people around you, and on social media, it just helps me. And I also paint a lot, and every episode we were doing and we talked about, I painted or I drew comics. I'm not too good at it, but it doesn't matter. I tried to process the things I heard by painting or drawing. And drawing these comics really helped me a lot. Did you sometimes have to put the report away because it just got too much? I can imagine that in everyday life you see certain things that kind of relate to the report, but are carried out differently in everyday life. Sometimes I really had to put it away, and sometimes I even threw it away. Well, I didn't throw my computer away, but I wish I could have, because I couldn't have a look at this report for 1 or 2 days. And then I took it up again after a few days because I wanted to read it, and it gave me a goal to work towards. But from time to time, I just needed that break because it's unbearable, but we have to talk about it, we have to read it.
And what was the most rejecting for you?
I think the excuse was really the most appalling thing. I mean, the report itself doesn't give an excuse, but I try to apply it to what's going on in the world. And there are several decisions that just weren't made and processes that aren't carried out fast enough and other things to consider. And I see this, but I can't accept those apologies, those lame excuses for not doing it anymore. I'm disappointed and really appalled by the status quo, because it's still not clear that we want to protect nature and environment, but we still don't want to build windmills and use wind energy, because if we don't do it now, there won't be anything left to protect. And I was really shocked by myself sometimes because my reaction was really, really heavy. And I want to add something. Another thing that I was really appalled by was, or made me question, what are we doing here? Are the many bits and pieces of information about human beings, about people who are especially affected by climate change, but we won't hear their voices. Let's start with disabled people, up to LGBTQ communities, to people of color. You know, there are so many different groups of women, of children, of certain people whose voices are just not being heard. But they are the ones who suffer the most. And this really gave me a hard time.
And you have also talked about this in the podcast, or talked about it in different contexts. And you talked about this for over 1 year, and there was a new episode a few days ago about climate finances, where's the money, and you looked more closely at the dynamics of the finance. Does it help you to look at these things more closely? Because I think it's really impressive how detailed you looked into these things. There are, I know some podcasts where there are only some show notes, but you really included a lot of information from pictures, additional explanations with links in your podcast. Is that also your way of dealing with this, to process this topic? I would
selber
I-
etwas dazu beizutragen, dass mehr Menschen
I
wissen,
think
was in
that-
diesem Bericht drinsteht?
do you want to do this to make it easier for other people to engage with the topic?
Natürlich beides.
Both, of course.
Da auf jeden Fall ein ganz großes Shoutout an Florian.
At this point, a very big shout out to Florian. Like in the beginning, I participated in doing the descriptions, but for now, I'm just not able to because of time issues. And what he does, he is listening to the entire podcast again and again, and then he cuts all the ums and ers out, and he makes notes. I've never asked him actually how he feels about it, but we will have to talk about it because to me it's really helpful to extract the real information of it and put it together. And this ensures that the people who listen to us don't have to open the report for themselves and read through it and read all the pages and look at all the images, but also we for ourselves, it helps us to get to the core of the issue, because the information is always with us. We are surrounded by it. But in our format, we get back to the facts. What's the gist? What are the 3 to 5 core topics that seem the most important to us?
How long do you need to read one chapter?
About 2 weeks. I think it's about 2 weeks on average. So we change reading it. So theoretically, I'd only have to read half of it, but I always read both parts. But I don't prepare both parts, obviously. And it takes me a really intense time to read through those with my drawings, with the comments I add. And for the other part, I just flick through it. So in total, it's 2 weeks. It's about 300 pages. To be fair, those pages contain a lot of references and a long list of authors, and also the images that can be quite big in size, so it's not only text. And if you see those images, you think, well, I don't have to read this page, but I mean, try to interpret those images you have there, those graphics, and sometimes you don't even understand them. And it's really hard to say, I don't understand that graphic or the whole paragraph, but I mean, you have to continue reading because maybe the next part, the context, helps you to understand it, or maybe having a discussion about it. And really, you have to deal with it that in between, you just don't have a clue what it's about. And sometimes I didn't find out my way out of the jungle.
How can I imagine a diagram?
So could we show some slides, please? I can also share my slides later, but just to have a short glance to give you an idea. So this is like the graphs I draw, the diagrams I do. And this is one example for a graph. It's about glowing coals, a burning ember diagram. There's so many information in it. It's only half a page, but I could talk about it for half an hour. That much information is in there.
Okay, so this was half an hour.
So yeah, listen to the podcast to know more.
But in any case, this is really impressive.
Wie lange brauchst du dann, um so eine Grafik zu verstehen?
How
Also, wenn du
long
sagst,
do
2
you need
Wochen,
to
um das Ganze
understand such a
durchzuziehen,
graphic?
dass man das irgendwie einmal durchblickt hat. Und du hast das studiert, muss man auch dazu sagen.
And
Also
we also need to
mit meinem
say that you
Hintergrund,
studied this.
Hintergrund, mit
this-
meinem Hintergrund
And
in Germanistik
I
und
haven't,
Soziologie,
yeah,
glaube ich,
so I
ist
don't have the
das
background for
zu
this,
verstehen, hilft
to
mir
understand this.
Ja, also ganz hart gesprochen, ich habe das erste Drittel studiert. Also ich habe die physikalischen
Well,
Grundlagen
I studied the first third, like the physical basics,
auch schon ein paar Jährchen her.
and it's been a
Das
while.
zweite Drittel,
And the second third,
Anpassung, Klimawandel,
which is about adaptation to climate change, I didn't study that one. So it's about building, about city planning, urban planning, coast management,
andere Sachen, mit denen hatte ich gar nichts zu tun. Und
completely different topics I didn't have to deal with before. It's about renewable energies, electromobility, also urban planning again. And I also didn't study this. And I noticed that these parts were more hard for me to understand them correctly. And they certainly take more time.
Okay, also
Okay,
finde ich, zeigt ja trotzdem, wenn man so
I
eine
think
grundlegende
it's
wissenschaftliche
still
Bildung bzw. Ausbildung hat, kann man sich
impressive
der
that
Thematik
when you
durchaus
have,
nähern. Und es ist nichts, wo man
you know, when
vielleicht
you
sagen
have the
sollte,
basic education
nee, das
in
kann ich ja nicht.
those
Nee, das
scientific
verstehe ich bestimmt sowieso nicht.
area,
Und das anderen überlassen
then
sollte.
it's
Also
still,
Respekt, dass du es gemacht hast. An
yeah,
dich
difficult,
warst du
and
vielleicht dann auch mal
it's,
richtig
I'm
wütend.
really impressed that
Vielleicht auch
you
wütend auf andere. Vielleicht
fought
auch
through
wütend auf
all of
Leute wie mich,
those
die einfach
things,
sagen, ach komm, den
and maybe you were
Text,
actually angry
weiß ich
at
jetzt
other
nicht, ob ich
people
das irgendwie lesen müsste.
because it was hard to read.
Also ich war viel wütend. Ich war wirklich viel wütend. Und
So I got angry a lot
bitter und frustriert.
and bitter and frustrated.
Aber ich war vorher schon wütend. Also ich war,
But I mean, I was angry before. It's not really brand new news.
Dazu gebracht, dass meine Wut jetzt in eine
But
Richtung geht.
I was able to direct my anger into another direction.
Auch dabei dann zu sagen, ja,
And
ja, du fährst jetzt mit dem Auto, das ist wirklich nicht gut fürs Klima.
sometimes you decide
und du machst das und so. Also,
to eat meat, to drive your car. We are aware it's bad for the climate, but we are pointing fingers on other people who do it. And the report showed me that we can't progress with this behavior. It doesn't take us where we should be, because we still live within a system. We are all part of this system, of this society, and we should fight those obligations. But the decision to buy a bamboo toothbrush instead of a plastic one might be hard for some people. We don't know their individual situation, what they would be able to afford. So we shouldn't say, why does that person why doesn't that person do it? Some people just don't worry about reusable plastic toothbrushes if they are not well. What we should question is the system, and why are bamboo toothbrushes more expensive than plastic ones? Why do SUVs even exist? Why are they allowed to drive within the city center? Why do we have that much individual road traffic? So I direct my rage away from the people, from the individuals, who can contribute to the greater good, but I direct it at the system, about the political actions and the big players that are involved. So it shifted in a different direction, and also towards myself, because sometimes I catch myself pointing fingers on individuals again. Of course, there are some decisions you can absolutely question, but at the moment I prefer directing my anger at the big players, so at the SUVs.
Stellst du die auch irgendwem oder?
But are you asking those questions to anyone, or are you drawing a comic? What is happening?
Keine
I
Ahnung, würde
think
mir jetzt nie einfallen, so mir als Menschen, aber kann ich mir vorstellen, dass man
it would be
Menschen
difficult
das Gefühl hat,
to
okay, das ist eine
address
Person, die
individual
kann ich jetzt nicht
persons,
reinschreiben, weil die finde ich doof, weil, keine Ahnung, die
or
macht
just
gerade
make the
irgendwas,
decision to yell
was
at
ich
one
nicht in
single
Ordnung
person
finde oder
because
was
that
überhaupt
person
nicht in
does something I
und
just
die
don't find
vielleicht
okay.
auch noch in ein paar Jahrzehnten eine bewohnbare Erde haben möchten. Wenn die Wut so gegen das System geht,
If the
wie
rage
stellst du dir
goes
das ein
towards the
bisschen schwieriger
system,
vor?
I imagine
Hast du auch
it must be
damit
more
irgendeinen Kompromiss
difficult.
damit
Did you
gefunden?
find a manner to cope or to pose the questions?
Ich suche noch.
I'm still
Also,
searching.
mal abgesehen von meinen politischen
If
Änderungen, die
so,
ich
I mean,
unterlaufen habe, oder meinen
apart from my
veränderten Ansichten,
political
habe ich
changes
aus
that I
diesen
have
Ansichten viel
implemented
gelernt und
and my
viel an meinen
changes
Positionen verändert
in my
habe, während des
views,
Berichts auch nochmal
so
zum
I actually
Thema
changed quite a
Aktivismus
bit
und
by
zum
reading
Thema
these
die anderen
these
auch
reports
eingehen,
also
dass ich
in
selber noch
context
am Weg
of
dahin
activism,
gefunden bin, wie ich das
but I'm
machen
still
möchte.
searching
Ich
for
glaube, das
answers
wird sich
on
erst bei mir
how I
finden.
want
Also da muss ich
to
mir, glaube ich,
act on
selber
these
Zeit
things,
geben. Es wird sich erst bei mir
and
finden,
I
wenn
need
wir
time for
damit
this.
fertig sind. Also wenn ich jetzt wirklich das letzte
And
Kapitel, ich lese die letzte Summary
I'm
Policy
reading
Papers, also für
the
den zweiten Teil
last
der
summary
Leseplane.
at the
Wenn das fertig
moment.
ist und ich das einmal
When I've
zugeschlagen
done
habe,
that, and when I can
dann
close the report,
finde ich hoffentlich einen Weg und ich hoffe, ich
then
kann bei
I
ganz,
hope
ganz
that
vielen anderen
I will be
abgucken,
able
was
to
sie machen, weil da
find
gibt es schon viel, was
a
sie tun.
way
Ich hoffe, da kann ich mir ein bisschen was abgucken.
to
Aber ich habe
act.
noch selbst keine Lösung gefunden. Keine
So
Lösung.
I haven't found a solution yet.
Du hast es gerade gesagt, es gibt natürlich einmal diesen
You
Kernbericht,
just
dann gibt's verschiedene
mentioned there's the
Summaries,
core
aber auch immer für
report,
Menschen, die Entscheidungen
several
treffen müssen
summaries
und die halt
for
nicht
decision
mehr
makers
als ein Jahr die Zeit haben oder
and who
Zeit
don't
für
have
nehmen
the
wollen, diesen
time or
ganzen
don't want to take the time to read
Komplettbericht
the
zu
entire
lesen.
report.
Du bist ja aber wirklich so in die Tiefe gegangen. Du hast
But
dir wirklich sowohl die
you really
Summaries
took a
als
deep
auch den,
dive. You
ich sag
read
jetzt mal,
both the summaries
Hauptbericht
and the
durchgelesen.
core report.
Was hat dich dabei überrascht?
What surprised you while reading it?
Oh ja, überrascht.
Oh,
Mich hat mich
surprised.
an vielen Stellen
There
tatsächlich
were many
überrascht.
surprises,
Manchmal durch
sometimes
Blickwinkel, mit denen ich nicht gerechnet habe.
new
Also
points of view or
es gibt
perspectives.
Geschichten da drin, also ich sage jetzt
There are
Geschichten,
stories,
weil
and
es
so I say stories
einzelne
because
Aktivitäten oder Aktionen
there
sind,
are
die
individual
passiert
activities
sind oder die
that
Communities
happened
gemacht haben, die dann
or where
erzählt werden
communities
oder
acted
wie die das erleben, also wie eine bestimmte
and
Community Klimawandel,
experienced
Anpassung erlebt.
climate change,
Und diese Blickwinkelwechsel, so in
and
kleinen
these points of
Infoboxen oder in
view,
kleinen Unterkapiteln,
and
haben mich manchmal dann sehr
which typically
überrascht.
were in small info boxes, so
Ja,
small
ich glaube,
tidbits of additional
das war was
information,
mich wirklich am meisten
they
überrascht hat.
really
Und
surprised
auch, dass
me.
der Klimabericht einen
And
selber eine Entwicklung
also
durchmacht. Also nicht, dass jetzt
that
inhaltlich
those climate
total was
reports
anderes Sachen als im ersten.
are
Im ersten
progressing,
Klimabericht, also dass
developing
es über
themselves
Neuerungen
over
plötzlich
time.
alles ganz andere Erkenntnisse werden, sondern
Not so much the
reicher an
climate change,
Also es kommen
climate
ja mehr
science,
Themen
but
dazu, mehr Blickwinkel
the
dazu,
way the
mehr
report is
Menschen
written.
dazu.
New
Du kannst dir
topics
so ein
are added,
Kapitel
new
nehmen und
humans,
du guckst dir
new
die
perspectives
Autorinnenliste
are
an. Und
added
dann heißt
to
es
these
immer, das
reports.
Kapitel, also die
And
sind
when you
alle
look at the
sehr
chapters and the
on
list of
point, die
authors,
Überschriften, dann heißt das Kapitel Asien. So, und dann wirst du
then you see that, for example, there's
zum
a chapter
allerersten bis
Asia,
ausschließlichen Teil, ich
and
kann da noch mal kurz
then
hinscrollen, das ist ein guter
you
Hinweis
will
aus der Regie,
for the most part, okay, let me quickly scroll over to that part to show you this. So
AutorInnen aus genau dieser Region.
then you will mostly
So, also das ist
see
dann der Hauptfokus.
Asian
Man achtet
authors,
da mittlerweile viel mehr und mit
and
viel mehr
there's a much higher focus
Blick
or
und
greater focus
Verstand drauf, dass sich
on
solche Sachen eben widerspiegeln. Dass es sowohl um die
including
Menschen
and
geht, die sich dort zu Wort
representing
melden, als auch die Fachexpertise, die sich
humans
dort zu
who
Wort
are
melden.
affected
Das sind so Sachen,
in
die
addition
haben mich dann
to
überrascht, dass es mittlerweile
the
da auch Vorgaben für
experts
gibt, dass die da
in the scientific
committed
areas,
haben, dass
and there
es
is
mehr
a
Personen
commitment
gibt, die cis-männlich sind,
that
die diese Berichte schreiben. Dass
more
es
people,
divers
more
und
people are
vielfältig
represented
ist. Und das hat mich überrascht,
and there is an increasing diversity in the contributors who produce these climate reports. And of course, it's very difficult to offer and orchestrate the offering process of these reports. And it's not perfect, but you can definitely see that something is changing and something is happening when it comes to collaboration and co-authoring with different different people across the world. And I was also surprised by belief. There was a chapter about belief and religion and how belief and religion affects how we interact with nature. And that was surprising to me, seeing this chapter. And I read the word belief. And if people believe in climate change, so how many, so do people not believe in climate change? This was an interesting way to express this, and how they use this wording in everyday life, that people might say, I do not believe, or I do believe in climate change. And I also
did
heard
I understand correctly? There was a whole chapter about Pope.
So he looked into this topic, and also religious people also were looked at, and it was described how they interact with how they act in the face of climate change, because Earth is our home, and it's important to look at people with religious backgrounds, how they look at the topic of climate change. And I didn't expect this. I didn't expect the Pope to be cited in these reports. And then I dived into the text that was quoted.
Okay, so it's not only this one big complex physical science topic, but it's combined knowledge from all possible areas that affect real people. At what point did you have to especially struggle while reading it? Because I noticed, you go through a roller coaster of emotions when reading it, and really decide to continue reading it because of that. What was especially hard?
So I'm a bit sorry to say this, but sometimes this was actually boring to read. The report is designed to say, I am coming from a specific sector, for example, construction or energy, economy or industry, and I just want to know what kind of adaptations I have to implement to be prepared for the climate crisis, to reduce the harm. And then I can just look at that part of the report and learn about those things that I only care. But if you read the whole report, then you also read something about Europe, which is a region, and we have to ask, and then you can read about what Europe needs to do to mitigate the effects of climate change. And I'm reading how the energy sector in Europe is adapting And then there's different subsections in the report. And then it really felt like I'm reading things again and again, but sometimes I was still surprised, even though I read this and then I said, okay, yes, I read this somewhere else already. But sometimes you still see new tidbits that surprise you, even if a lot of things are repeated.
You also talk about it in podcast.
Yes, but not only in the podcast, but I also talked to a lot of people around me with information about climate. And I have accumulated a lot of information about where things are in the report and what kind of information is actually in the report and what is not in the report. A lot of people, yeah. So I can help people find information in the report or how not to find.
So you're not an impersonated encyclopedia, but you kind of can point out where in encyclopedia people may find the information.
Yes, so this is, I'm like a librarian. I tell people where to find things.
It seems that you're content to be this indicator of directions and to be able to say, I listen to someone, I hear about a problem, and I have an idea of how to approach it.
Yes. So I see this as a positive thing, and I always, try to see things positively, even though it can be stressful and tiring, because I have all of this information in my head. And then I meet people who say it's all too late, and then I feel like, no, it's wrong. The report says it's not too late. And people look at me with big eyes, and then I can't stay calm. And then people say, I know that, or I heard this, and that this technology will solve it. And then I say, no, in the report, there's actually something else. And there's a lot of people who just are wrong, do not have the right information. And people don't listen to me. And some people just say, it's just the IPCC. And some people just don't believe me and ask me, why should you actually know this? And then I say,
So, what would be a situation where you would get confused or fall into the trap?
Yes, I still think it's good that people actually question those things. And I think it's okay to question things. And of course, the report is already 1 year old and there's new research coming out. But a foundation that we can agree on, when people argue against this, or when people don't understand this and say things that are fundamentally wrong, then it's really difficult for me to stay calm. And then sometimes I'm just 2 hours in a discussion when there's a big disagreement. And then I also really need to tell people, hey, you are wrong. And I can't just accept them spreading falsehoods. And sometimes I really have to tell myself, okay, this is not worth it. I need to stop.
Well, this is something I find really sad, because knowledge is not only opportunity and creates more space, but it can also be a burden you have to carry around with you. Whom are you talking about this? Do you have scientific friends, or is it just anyone who crosses your path in that moment? Or who are the people you prefer to talk about this burden?
I talk to friends and people I know, to some degree people I'm very close to some degree other people. And sometimes it's even close people who say wrong things, which makes it extra hard to have these discussions. And I talk to people who I trust. That's typically acquaintances, even spontaneous acquaintances, including my coach, and who calls me back and tells me about how to interact with people and how to how to use my emotions adequately.
Die dann manchmal eben so,
And-
in dem Fall dann auch Erfahrungen teilen. Also es gibt Leute, die dann forschen in
And
dem Bereich,
there
zum
are
Beispiel wie
people who do
kommuniziert man in der
research
Wissenschaft und da auch
in the topic
sagen,
of
ja,
science
das kann
communication.
frustrierend sein und ich verstehe das
And
und das. Und dann
yes,
hat
it
man
can
so
be
einen
frustrating, and I understand this.
Austausch auf einer sehr kollegialen Ebene, weil es denen ähnlich geht. Aber das haben natürlich auch
And
Menschen,
then
die
you
sich
can
selbst mit dem
have
Thema beschäftigen.
an
Also auf Social
exchange
Media
on a
gibt es
very
viele Leute, die ganz
colloquial
aktivistisch unterwegs sind und da ganz viel
level.
tun. Und da habe ich auch ganz viele gemeinsame
And there's a lot of
Interessen.
things you can
Also
do.
möchte ich drüber reden, was diese
And
Aktivisten
I
tun,
want to
wissen
talk
tun und
about
wie es mit denen macht. Und ich
what
merke,
activists
da sind
do
Parallelen
and
zu dem,
how
was es mit mir
how
macht.
it feels for these
Lohnt sich
activists to
total stark,
communicate
darüber zu reden und
with
auf so einer
others
Metaebene zu sein und diese Metaebene
and
zu bauen.
to have this discussion on
Das
the
heißt
meta
also,
level.
eigentlich dürfte man diesen Bericht gar nicht veröffentlichen, ohne einen
But
fetten
this
Warnhinweis
also
darauf.
means that the
Achtung,
report should be
bitte
published with
markiere,
a
worauf du dich
big
hier wirklich
warning.
einlässt und
Pay attention to what you're getting
stell
yourself
vielleicht noch
into,
sicher, dass du die nötigen Menschen
and
und die
make
nötige
sure
Unterstützung
to
an der
be
Hand hast.
surrounded by the
Also
right
es nicht
people
einfach
and
mal so
support,
weitergehen sollte, stelle ich
and
gerade so
don't
fest.
just
Also wenn ich
jump
jetzt morgen
into
denke, ja,
it.
fange ich mal
I mean,
an.
looks like this to me, because
Ja,
you
schon
can't just
sinnvoll,
go
sich
like,
vorher
ah
schon mal
yeah,
Gedanken zu
tomorrow I'll
machen,
read
dass du dir
into
im
it,
Vorfeld sowas
but you really have to think about it beforehand and prepare.
auf den Gedanken
Did you
kommen,
do
dass man
this,
sich für
or
vorbereiten
did it even occur to you that you need to prepare? Or maybe I take it to the top.
A bit exaggerated, but there's still a kernel of truth. And I've read a lot of scientific articles in my life, including climate science articles. And I thought, yeah, that's 10 pages science. That's what I do on a daily basis. I'm a scientist. I read things and I talk about it. And I didn't expect that it would affect me on a personal level so much. I'm not sure if you need a warning, but there is a potential because, yeah, those 10,000 pages can actually affect your personality. Yeah, but I didn't really think about psychological consequences in advance.
An welchen Stellen hat dir der Bericht auch so richtig
And
Angst
what were the
gemacht
parts
oder wo
where
hast du
you
dich
really
einsam
got scared, where it frightened you, or where you felt lonely while reading the report?
Ja, also man fühlt viel Unsicherheit.
There's a lot of, I felt a lot of uncertainty
durch eine Einzelperson erstmal
because
werden kann. So, also man
those things can't be addressed by a single person. So I can't solve this on my own. We all have to work together. And then you look left and right and you see a lot of people not going in the same direction as you. And you feel weak because you're not able to do much on your own or alone. And you feel helpless, but then it makes sense to look at the report and see what kind of things you can actually do and how communities across the world address climate change. And you can expand your horizon and interact and talk to people who are also working against climate change to help with your own scaredness.
Did it increase over time, or does it has its highs and lows? How would you describe it?
So it was a continuous roller coaster. There, so short trigger warning on war for 2 minutes. So better disable sound or stop listening if you don't want to hear about war. There is a section about the potential for war and conflicts. What can happen? War on resources, war on space when the sea levels rise. Those things really scared me. That was a really deep chapter, and I couldn't handle this. And I started reading this, and I was really surprised how much it affected me. But there's also an entire section how this can actually be a chance or an opportunity. And for example, rivers don't end at borders in all cases. So this is an opportunity for international cooperation when several countries are affected and people interact and collaborate across borders with measurement devices, and people just get started and ignore that there are borders between countries. And cooperation is being created because of climate change that wasn't there before. And therefore, people lose fear and gain hope, because there can be positive consequences when you approach things in the right way. And there can be new treaties and cooperation.
It's good to see the light at the end of the chapter, at least. So, what are appropriate times of the day to read it? I like to read in the morning or before I go to bed. Both doesn't seem like the ideal option to read a report like this, because maybe you need an hour to calm down. And just, get on about something different to get it out of your mind, because it wouldn't let you sleep. Did you try to set time limits for your reads?
Wow, what a question. That's actually a good one. No, I didn't have any time limits. But I know where I read the most things, and that's mostly in trains. And when I'm among people, for example, in a train or in a cafe, then it was nicer to read. It felt just better when I read among people, but otherwise very late at night. I'm a night owl. I am awake at 2 in the morning and sit at my desk. But often I'm online on Discord, and people were playing and talking, and I had the report in front of me, and I was reading it. And yeah, basically people were around me. And now I just actually see it, the green thread, that there were always people around me. So I could actually raise my head while I was reading, and that I could express myself, say, I don't understand this part, and have people actually still realize I'm here.
Also jetzt auch nicht so wie Belletristik, schöne Literatur.
So it's not like literature, novels, criminal romance, but sometimes it might be good to be in contact with the outside world. And say, I might just be reading one of the most detailed descriptions of reality, and it sounds, at parts, it sounds super horrible. But I keep reading it, but I'm surrounded by beautiful things. You know, the sun is shining. I still know I'm alive. Maybe subconsciously, this lifts you up.
Yeah, actually, I didn't really think about it, and yeah, I think you have a point.
Okay, also ich nehme mit, auf jeden Fall, es verändert.
Okay, so what I take away for myself is that it changes people, not only when you read 10,000 pages of anything, but especially of this material. I found it interesting that you mentioned those little spots of light you see while reading it. How many were there? Or how regularly did those occur? Because you might remember them more easily. That's why I mentioned them, but there also might be long, dark tracks while reading it. So, are they even countable?
No, there's no general way to say this, because it's just a listing of facts, of scientific facts, and the good news or the good facts, those are the things that you create yourself when you read the reports. For example, when you read about cooperation and positive effects, and there are different things that trigger a positive feeling in me when I read about initiatives that where nests for penguins are built, and where you read about those initiatives and focus less on the big negative picture, and then you read about those things that are described in a very pragmatic way about the penguins and their nests. But and I think everyone reading those reports will get something else out of them. But for me, initiatives, communities, people, when you read about them, there's a lot of things you can read from those sections, and you see that people actually love, people actually want to contribute positive things. And I don't want to give any numbers how much there is, how many times I had a smile on my face when reading those things. But there are positive parts in these reports.
I think, it also might be difficult to ask for a conclusion. But I would ask you, would you read it again?
That's the big question. There will probably be a 7th report. If I would read that, I can't tell. It was a lot of stress and work to read this, and I'm still working full-time. And this is things I do in addition to my full-time job. It takes a lot of time very pragmatic. I have to consider if I would like to do this emotional roller coaster. I would actually rather have a couple of months time to just process all the things I've read. And if I could travel back in time and I would see Florian's requests with the knowledge that I have now, then I would say yes, count me in. Because despite all the bad experiences, it was still a good thing to know all of those things. And I'm glad that I did this. But doing it again, it's hard to make a prognosis. I would need to run a model to give an answer on that.
Okay, then we would need new research. Let's stay with what we have for now. So if you look further beyond, you say you do it again because it shows you what you already got, what's in progress, what's growing. But in general, would you recommend everyone to read it or parts of it? And what would you expect to be their reaction? I think because it's very polarizing. On the one hand, it's incredible that this knowledge has been accumulated, that we humans can write this knowledge down, all the scientific processes behind it. But on the other hand, I ask myself, does really everyone have to know it? Because it also doesn't really work. And I don't think that everyone is in a situation, be it time-wise, already existing knowledge, in a position to really read it and absorb it. So what would be your expectation for other people? Would you want them to read it, or would you rather have not everyone read it, but rather listen to your podcast?
And I don't think everyone has to read this. Not everyone has to read this. There are humans where I definitely think you should do it, because I noticed that there's a lot of misunderstanding and ignorance. But those people who know that we need to do something, and if they ask me, what should I read, what should I look at, then I would tell them, then look at the things where you can do something. For example, where you can do something locally, for example, with brown coal and excavations. The whole topic around Hambach, if this is your local area. So I would recommend to read those parts where you locally can affect things. And this is something I think is meaningful. Yes, of course, you can get a big or general overview with big reports, but for the things that you personally care about, where your heart is burning, there I would recommend that you look at local things you can do. There is an IPCC chapter about local action, and I think people should find their own things that they can do. And some people also say that the IPCC is a rather moderate description. And there are also other publications and research where you can look at things that are even more cutting edge and relevant. But If you want to read the whole thing, if you want to have the complete overview,
Gerne nachholen.
then you can of course do that.
Trotzdem hast du uns ja schon ziemlich viele Einblicke gegeben in diese ganzen
But you have
Aufnahmen, die da
provided us with a lot of insights of this whole roller coaster.
was mit einem als
And
Menschen.
I noted
Trotzdem
that it
hat man
does
ja
something
auch,
to
wenn
you.
man jetzt in der Wissenschaft arbeitet, wie du,
But
wahrscheinlich auch
also,
so eine,
if you work in
ich sag mal,
science like you do,
professionelle Ader,
I think you might have some
ich find's auch total
professional
spannend,
approach
einfach
towards it.
Infos zu erfahren
I mean,
über
I
die
also
Welt.
find it really
Was mich
fascinating
interessieren würde, hat
to
sich denn
get
für dich
those
irgendwas
information.
verändert?
But
Wem
for
vertraust du?
you
Welchen
personally,
Informationen vertraust
did something
du?
change?
Was liest
Whom
du
do you
besonders
trust?
gerne?
What information do you
Hat sich
trust?
da
What are your
irgendwas über die
sources?
Zeit für dich getan, weil du
Did
gemerkt hast,
something change in that area over
manche
time?
machen das vielleicht zu unterkomplex und
Because
sind dann eher enttäuscht
some
mit ihren
information
Informationen
provided
oder
was
andere
not
schaffen es
complex
besser
enough,
umzusetzen. Ich glaube, wenn man
and
diese Wissenschaft
others
hat,
did a
irgendwie
better
das Verständnis
job
über das Jahr
at delivering it.
aufgebaut hat oder die
Because with the
1,5 Jahre,
knowledge you
dann
build over
kann man
this 1.5
vielleicht auch
years,
Informationen anders bewerten.
you
Hat sich
might
da
be able
irgendwas
to
verändert?
rate this information in a different way.
Tatsächlich habe ich eine
Actually,
gewisse
I
Freude dafür entwickelt, dass ganz
enjoy,
viele Menschen
or I
ganz viel
developed
über
a
das Thema
joy
reden, also auch Forschende über das Thema
for
reden und die Entwicklung
so seeing
das
that
alle
people
auf ihre
learn
eigene Art machen.
and
Also
understand
ich freue mich sowohl über die, die
the
das ganz
climate topic.
simplifiziert machen und mit so
I'm also happy about people who
Infografik, das
explain things in a very simplistic way.
irgendwie in 25 Minuten
But yeah, so I also am happy about people who do a 25 minutes YouTube video about the topic.
Begeisterung dafür entwickelt, dass das so unterschiedlich
And
ist, weil wir Menschen
I'm
auch so unterschiedlich sind.
encouraged,
Und was
or
die
I'm
einen
happy
vielleicht
that there's so much diversity
erwischt und genau auf dem richtigen
when
Fuß erwischt und ganz
in
einfache
terms of
Botschaft,
communication,
ist für die anderen total
because
überhaupt
people are
nichts.
different and
Dieses
sometimes different forms of
Urteile das
climate
quasi gar nicht mehr,
communication
wie bestimmte
are
Leute jetzt
differently
über
effective for
Klimakrise
different
reden.
people.
Oder ich beurteile
And
es weniger,
I don't
weil ich
judge
immer
people
überlege, für wen könnte
in
das
terms of how they
eigentlich
talk
sein.
about the climate crisis, but
Das,
it's more
dass
about
ich gar nicht mehr
that
so sage, na, es gibt nur diesen einen Weg, sondern
they,
ich feiere die
um,
Vielfalt. Und wer
yeah,
immer
so
über
that I'm
redet und
celebrating
die Klimakrise
the
als
diversity, how people
Klimabehandlung
communicate in many different ways.
daneben stehen. Und wenn
And
irgendwie was falsch
I,
erklärt wird, und ich bin mir so
if
sicher,
someone explains something incorrectly, then I also say that I also explained some things incorrectly in the past, and then I would still say, then I would still try to correct people, and I also corrected myself in the past. And sometimes you have to explain things more deeply.
gelassener geworden.
Ich glaube, wenn ich mir so drüber nachdenke,
Thinking about
macht es
it,
sehr wütend und ich glaube auch sehr
I
schnell
personally
wütend,
feel
wenn
really
gerade
angry
politische
because
EntscheidungsträgerInnen
it's political decision makers
erzählen. Dinge, wo
who
ganz klar
talk
ist, dass
such
sie
nonsense.
entweder weil sie selbst schlecht
Nonsense
informiert
where
sind
it's
oder
clear as
vielleicht
glass
auch manchmal,
that
jetzt
it's
nicht
not
ganz
true.
böse und weitreichende Unterstellung, aber
And
vielleicht auch
sometimes it's even evil-willed, you know,
Dinge
it's
zu
done on purpose.
vereinfachen, Dinge ein bisschen
Or they
verstehen,
oversimplify
ein bisschen
things,
anders betrachten. Wie gehst
put
du
a
damit
slightly
Also
weird
sind
perspective on it.
scheinbare
So
Fakten, die
how do you
Menschen auf
cope with
großen Bühnen
this,
erzählen
let's call them
und
fake
die ja
facts,
auch
presented
dadurch
on
eine
the big
große
stage
Reichweite haben, obwohl
by
ich mir
people who have a
denke,
big reach?
naja, es gibt Menschen, die wurden damit beauftragt, einen
Because I
Bericht zu
think
erstellen, die ja
there
alles
are
Wissen
people who are in charge
zusammenzustellen,
of that
Kurzfassungen
report to
davon zu
gather
verfassen
this
und
information,
du schaffst es nicht mal da reinzuschauen
but
oder ignorierst es
they
bewusst,
can't even
finde ich
manage
immer wieder ein
to
starkes
prepare
Stück und
really
mich
useful
persönlich
and
sehr oft
factual
wütend.
based information.
Wie geht's dir damit
Doesn't
jetzt gerade,
make
nachdem du diesen
this
ganzen
angry,
Bericht gelesen hast? Du als
doesn't make it
junger
angry.
Mensch, wie ja irgendwie andere auch, aber der jetzt nicht mal irgendwie Entscheidungen in dem Bereich fällen müsste.
Ich bin quasi gerade automatisch davon ausgegangen, von den Menschen, die über das Klima reden, die
I
das
think
vermitteln wollen, was da
automatically
Genau, da
that
hatte ich nämlich so den Eindruck, so
Ja,
anyone
genau.
who talks about the
du hast
climate,
vielleicht
that they
schon
try to
WissenschaftlerInnen selber, Aber
Yeah.
es gibt ja eben auch noch andere Akteure in unserer Welt, die, wie gesagt, große Bühnen
But
haben.
there are also actors on, as I said, huge stages in this world.
Tatsächlich,
Yes.
da erschrecke ich mich manchmal bei mich selber, wie
I'm-
kaum aushaltbar das teilweise für mich ist, wenn ich
I'm sometimes
Politiker
negatively
rede
surprised
in
how
Gruppen und
hard to bear it is,
und ich
how
mir denke,
much
also
misinformation is being
das hätte ja
produced.
jemand in einem 2-Minuten-Check
Some people
recherchieren
could
können.
easily
Das
check
ist so
that
wütend, weil ich einfach auch
people are
nicht mehr,
spreading
da
lies.
verliere ich ein bisschen den Glauben daran, dass das
And
so ein aus Versehen ist und frage mich,
I'm-
ob da irgendwie
I'm
eine
really-
Agenda dahinter steckt. Und das ist dann in meinem Kopf.
I'm not giving.
Macht ja auch was
I have.
Sinn, ja?
It's very hard to
Ich
give
will das den
people
Leuten
the
gar
benefit
nicht
of doubt when they
unterstellen und
spread so
versuchen,
much
dagegen anzukämpfen.
misinformation.
Zu sagen, ja, aber so ist das nicht, ist es so und so und so.
And
Aber dieser Impuls bei der Häufigkeit.
but for me,
und bei manchen
because it's so frequently that people are
ist es ja auch eine Persistenz und man weiß, dass da etwas
people are very
Systematisches
persistent
dahinter
and
steckt.
systematic
So kann ich
with
damit
their
umgehen, ja.
misinformation, and
Und,
I'm out
bin
of
ziemlich schnell wütend.
patience, and I'm getting very quickly, angry very quickly.
Also dann doch tiefgreifende Veränderungen, wenn man dann halt irgendwie
So
auf einmal
it's
merkt, so, ich
quite
habe
a
was
significant
gelernt und eben
change
nicht nur diesen
if you
Wissensglauben,
realize
sondern
that
auch
your
die Last.
knowledge
Du hast schon
is
gesagt,
higher than other
es
people's.
ist sehr unterschiedlich, ob man sich selbst
As you
anfängt,
just
diese Bücher
said,
zu lesen oder
it
nicht. Die
differs from
meisten werden
person to
wahrscheinlich
person
nicht
if you
unbedingt die Ressourcen
read the
dafür haben.
report or not. Most people won't have the resources for it. But nonetheless, if you wanted to convince me to read this report, what would be your strongest points in favor of it?
Warum du trotzdem sagen würdest, doch war die richtige Entscheidung, auch wenn
Why
da
would you say reading
sehr
this
viele
report
schwere
is the
Brocken
right
drin sind
decision,
und sich
although
auch
it might
weiterziehen bis in dein
go quite
wirkliches
heavy on
Leben?
you and affect your everyday
Erzähl
life?
mir die Argumente, wo du sagen würdest, lies es aus diesen Gründen.
What are the reasons to read it?
Oh Gott, das ist so schwer.
Oh God, this is hard.
Die Person sehr, sehr gut kennen, die einer
But for that, you actually would need to know the person very well. And I'm not sure if I would give that advice.
Ich
I
würde
think
Personen raten, die wie ich
I-
so eine super sachliche und ich bin jetzt eigentlich
I would recommend this to people who are very rational,
rangeht und sich mal denkt, das sind doch hier Fakten
who-
und da muss man doch mitarbeiten.
where people say, yes, so these are facts, and you have to work with them. And when you read those reports,
oh mein Gott, das ist alles voller
then
Emotionen und das
you
basiert auf
realize
Emotionen und ob wir etwas tun oder
that there's a
nicht,
lot
ist
of
mit Emotionen verbunden.
emotions,
Den Leuten
and
würde ich das raten und sagen, das ist was Positives.
you feel
Schaut da rein, das sind Fakten,
that-
die ihr lest, aber es macht etwas
yeah. So when you read this,
Das ist
then
total-
it's a lot of
Also
facts,
ich finde das ein absoluter
and
Selling Point in dem Fall, weil man eben so durch diese
you
gesamten
will-
Themenkomplex durchgeht, von der nüchternen Physik
so there is a lot of emotion involved when you read this, but it's
wie man
still
jetzt
facts.
tatsächlich, damit umgeht, wenn politisch irgendwie
And
da Widerstand
you have
herrscht,
to-
welche
and then
Policies
there's the
gibt es denn und
question,
wo
of
man
course,
angehen
how-
kann und wie funktionieren die und wie
How
kann
to
man
react
einsetzen
when
in Staaten.
politics,
Das,
yeah, how,
den Leuten würde ich es raten, die ja so sind wie ich, vielleicht mit diesem nüchternen, das sind alles Fakten, das ist meine, soll ja nicht
so
passieren.
in general,
Lernen, dass es vielleicht
just look at those things as facts.
Aber die würde ich wahrscheinlich nicht raten.
But I wouldn't recommend to those people to read it.
Ja. Ja.
I mean, yeah, with the different stakeholders in there is also why I hold back a little bit, because it's a highly intriguing topic. But at the same time, I ask myself, well, it's nothing new, right? And even I say this, and I'm not too much of an expert in this matter. But I've read and heard so much about it for years. You know, remember back the Agenda 2020 when we grew up. I don't understand how this topic could be ignored for that long. And that's why I think I just have a native anger within me when it comes to it. And I'm happy that there are people like you or Florian Freistetter who read the report and then summarize the facts in their podcast. You said we don't necessarily have to mention it, but I'm a huge fan of binge listening to podcasts, but I mean, there's 73 episodes now, but it's certainly worth listening to all of them. I think it's a great opportunity to learn about the topic and not having to go through all the information in the original report. I think others agree. We have received a lot of comments, thanking you for your work there. And thank you for taking us on this journey and also including all the warnings, but also the rays of light, the short rays of hope in there. Thank you very much for the insights, for the over an hour of talk. And a huge thank you to all the organizers, to everyone who participated, who made this possible here. We have arrived at the end of this Q&A regarding 10,000 pages later, what impact the climate report had on me, or on Claudia in this case.
And maybe next time we choose a different title, if there's a next time.
Yeah.